Hello, and welcome. Today, we step into a world that often goes unnoticed, the world of the quiet. This story is not just about silence, but about the hidden strength inside it. The book we'll explore is Quiet by Susan Cain, a journey into the lives of introverts and the culture that often misunderstands them. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to BookSnap, and comment below the title of the book you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Now, let's begin. Imagine walking into a crowded room where everyone seems to know what to say. Laughter rises above the chatter, hands wave in animated gestures, conversations bounce like balls in constant motion. In that space, the loudest voice is not just heard. It is rewarded. The confident, the quick-tongued, the bold. These are the ones we are taught to admire. From classrooms that grade participation to companies that value team players, society has quietly crafted what Susan Cain calls the extrovert ideal. This ideal has been stitched into the fabric of modern life. Schools praise students who speak up quickly, even when the thoughtful child in the corner may be building an idea with far greater depth. Workplaces design open offices, celebrating brainstorms over solitude, as if the value of a mind can only be measured by how fast it can perform in public. Even in politics, the stage is owned by the charismatic, the energetic, the one who commands attention. But what does this mean for those who do not shine in the spotlight? For the boy who prefers the library to the playground? For the woman who thinks deeply before she speaks, her wisdom unfolding in quiet reflection? For the man whose calm presence steadies a room, even when he says very little? The truth is, they often feel like outsiders in a world tuned to celebrate noise. Cain describes this cultural bias with clarity. We live in an age where being social, outgoing, and expressive is seen as a requirement for success. The quiet are not just overlooked, they are sometimes made to feel defective. Children are labeled as shy, as though it were a flaw. Adults are pushed into networking events where silence feels like a weakness. Even marriages and friendships carry the assumption that the extroverted style of communication is the healthier one. And yet, beneath this ideal lies a distortion. Because when we worship noise, we risk losing wisdom. When we only reward those who speak first, we silence those who might think best. The extrovert ideal has blinded us to a simple truth. Not every form of strength is loud. Imagine for a moment a spectrum of human temperament. On one side, the high-energy extrovert, thriving in stimulation, fueled by interaction. On the other, the reflective introvert, recharged by solitude, listening deeply before acting. Society has tilted the balance heavily toward one side, but in doing so, it has overlooked half of human potential. Cain brings us face to face with this imbalance by showing how it shapes lives from the very beginning. Picture a child, hesitant to join a group game, sitting on the edge, watching closely. Teachers may worry about her lack of confidence. Parents may urge her to come out of her shell. But what if, inside that shell, is a mind weaving ideas with extraordinary richness? What if her quietness is not a limitation, but a space where imagination takes root? The extrovert ideal tells us that to succeed, we must speak louder, move faster, join in more. But Cain invites us to question, at what cost? Do we gain confidence, or do we lose depth? Do we create community, or do we drown out the voices that rise more slowly but perhaps more meaningfully? Think of history's most transformative figures. Not all of them fit the mold of the extrovert. Rosa Parks, whose quiet courage sparked a movement. Albert Einstein, whose solitude fueled discoveries that reshaped our understanding of the universe. These examples whisper a truth. Sometimes it is the quietest voice that carries the most power. The tension of this first theme is simple but profound. We live in a culture of noise, but the quiet have gifts we desperately need. The stage has been tilted toward extroversion, but the play of life cannot be complete without introversion. Cain's journey begins here, by lifting the veil on this bias and asking us to see differently. This opening is not just about introverts and extroverts. It is about redefining strength. To see that speaking less does not mean contributing less. To understand that listening can be as powerful as speaking. To remember that a whisper in the right moment can change the world. There is a quiet power that hums beneath the surface of life, often unnoticed in the roar of society's expectations. To see it, you must slow down, lean closer, and pay attention to what does not shout. Susan Cain guides us into this hidden realm, the inner strength of introversion. Picture a person seated at the edge of a bustling cafe. Around them, laughter rises, cups clink, conversations dart back and forth. Yet at their small corner table, they are absorbed in a notebook, words pouring from their pen like a private river. They are not antisocial. They are not disengaged. They are simply attuned to a different rhythm. Their energy flows inward, where thoughts are carefully sifted, connections quietly drawn, and ideas slowly ripen. Introverts hold treasures inside their quietude. They think deeply, often longer than others are willing to wait. This deep focus can sharpen into creativity. Many great inventions, artistic breakthroughs, and scientific discoveries have been born in solitude, in the moments when the mind turns inward rather than outward. Cain shows us that this inner turning is not a weakness but a form of strength that extrovert-dominated culture often overlooks. Take empathy. Introverts, with their attentiveness to detail and sensitivity to subtle cues, often sense moods, emotions, and shifts in a room before others notice. Their listening is not passive but active, tuned like a finely strung instrument. Where an extrovert might fill silence with words, the introvert's silence allows another person to be fully heard. This ability to create space for others is not just a social gift. It is an emotional anchor. Think of writers, artists, and philosophers. From Virginia Woolf to Marcel Proust, from Emily Dickinson to J.K. Rowling, many of the voices that shaped culture did so not by speaking loudly in public, but by retreating into solitude and returning with visions the rest of us could inhabit. Cain reminds us that introversion is often the soil where imagination flourishes, precisely because it is free from constant interruption. Yet the gifts of introversion extend far beyond art. In science and business, breakthroughs often come from those who work quietly, absorbed in the intricacies of a problem. Charles Darwin, for instance, spent long hours walking alone in his garden paths, mulling over the mysteries of nature. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, thrives not by constant networking but by quiet analysis and patient decision-making. Cain emphasizes that the quiet mind is not empty but fertile. Its strength lies in reflection. Where others see boredom and stillness, the introvert sees space to weave meaning. Where others see hesitation, the introvert is often cultivating precision. Their calm exterior hides a vibrant interior. Of course, this does not mean introverts avoid the world. They engage with it differently. Many introverts can deliver powerful speeches, lead teams, and inspire movements. But afterward, they may need to retreat, to gather themselves in solitude before returning to the fray. It is this balance, stepping into the world, then stepping back to recharge, that sustains their power. Cain captures this rhythm beautifully. Introverts are not broken extroverts. They are not defective versions of the cultural ideal. They are a different archetype altogether, carrying a quieter kind of energy that, when honored, transforms not only their own lives but also the lives of those around them. Imagine a candle in a storm. It does not blaze like a bonfire, yet its flame endures, offering light in the darkness. Introverts are often like that. Their presence steady, their impact subtle but lasting. This recognition begins to shift the frame of how we view human potential. Instead of asking introverts to change, we can ask, what can we learn from them? What do they reveal about the value of slowing down, of listening deeply, of thinking before speaking? Cain's invitation is to look at introversion not as a gap to be filled, but as a gift to be unwrapped. A gift that gives us thinkers, creators, and leaders who shape the world not with noise, but with depth. And so, from the clamor of extroverted ideals, we move into the sanctuary of introverted power, a reminder that not all strength is loud, not all influence is visible, and not all change begins in the crowd. Some of it begins alone, in silence, where the seeds of greatness quietly take root. To understand how we arrived at this imbalance, Cain takes us on a journey into history, a story of how societies learned to prize volume over depth, charisma over character. It did not happen overnight. It was built, brick by brick, in the very architecture of modern life. At the turn of the 20th century, America stood at a crossroads. The country was shifting from small towns, where reputations rested on one's integrity, into booming cities filled with strangers. In these new environments, trust could not be measured by long-standing familiarity. Instead, people began to judge one another quickly, often on surface impressions. This cultural pivot transformed the very definition of success. Before this change, the culture of character reigned. Children were taught virtues like honesty, duty, and modesty. Your worth lay in how faithfully you lived up to moral standards. But with the rise of industrialization and urban life came a new demand: the ability to impress, to stand out, to capture attention in crowded rooms. And so emerged what Cain calls the culture of personality. Magazines, advice columns, and self-help books of the early 1900s began to glorify charm, magnetism, and boldness. The quiet virtues of character were overshadowed by the new mandate: to be liked, admired, and remembered. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936, became the handbook of this new era, teaching Americans to smile more, talk more, and project confidence. From this soil grew the extrovert ideal that still shapes us today. Schools began rewarding students for participation, valuing quick answers over careful thought. Corporate culture shifted toward salesmanship, networking, and the art of persuasion. Politicians rose not just for their policies, but for their ability to command a stage. In every corner of society, charisma became currency. Cain shows us how deeply this transformation runs. Consider the rise of the self-made man, the idea that one could reinvent oneself through sheer will and performance. In practice, this meant learning to perform a personality, to sell not just products but oneself. Silence, reflection, and restraint were recast as weaknesses. This historical shift explains why introverts often feel out of step in modern settings. It is not simply their temperament, it is the cultural current pushing against them. Imagine being left-handed in a world built for right-handedness. Every desk, tool, and instruction assumes a way of being that is not yours. Introverts live with a similar mismatch. The world assumes noise, while they carry silence. Yet Cain does not tell this history as nostalgia for a quieter past. Instead, she reveals how the pendulum swing toward extroversion left us unbalanced. By glorifying the loud, we risk silencing the wise. By valuing performance over depth, we risk mistaking showmanship for substance. Consider the boardroom filled with executives. The first to speak sets the tone. The most confident voice steers the room. But confidence is not the same as competence. History has shown us, in business failures, in reckless wars, that decisions made in haste, without space for quiet reflection, can be catastrophic. Cain's historical lens reminds us that cultural values are not fixed. They are choices, shaped by time and circumstance, and if they were chosen once, they can be reconsidered now. So, as we look back at this century-long tilt toward extroversion, a question emerges. Must we continue down this path? Or can we recover the balance, bringing back the virtues of stillness, thoughtfulness, and careful listening to stand alongside charisma and boldness? The story of introversion is not about replacing one ideal with another. It is about weaving both into a fuller picture of what it means to be human. Now that we see how culture tilts toward noise, the question sharpens. How does it feel to live quietly in a noisy world? Susan Cain takes us inside the daily friction of introverts navigating spaces designed for constant interaction. Picture the modern office. Open floors, low dividers, rows of desks without walls. Once hailed as symbols of collaboration, these spaces buzz with conversation, clatter, and interruptions. For the extrovert, such energy feels electric. For the introvert, it can feel like standing in a wind tunnel, thoughts constantly scattered by the breeze. To find focus in such an environment is like trying to read poetry in the middle of a carnival. The same dynamic plays out in classrooms. Teachers often grade children not only on what they know, but on how much they speak up. The child who blurts an answer quickly, even if shallow, is rewarded with praise. The one who waits, gathering thoughts carefully, risks being labeled disengaged. This is not a measure of intelligence, but of comfort with performance. And yet, the quiet child may carry insights far deeper than the one eager to wave a hand. Social gatherings bring another layer of challenge. Networking events brim with rapid introductions, practiced smiles, conversations that skim the surface before darting away. In such spaces, introverts often feel invisible. Their natural preference for meaningful one-on-one dialogue gets drowned out by the hum of small talk. They may leave such events not only drained but also convinced they have failed some invisible test of belonging. Cain paints these scenarios with empathy, not as complaints but as truths. The quiet are not less capable. They are navigating terrain designed without them in mind. Imagine planting a shade-loving flower in blazing sunlight. Its struggle is not weakness, it is mismatch. This mismatch carries subtle costs. Groupthink, for example, thrives in noisy environments. In brainstorming sessions, louder voices dominate, while quieter ones withdraw, even when their ideas are stronger. Studies show that groups often generate fewer creative solutions when forced into such extroverted models, compared to when individuals are given space to think alone first. The very structures meant to spark innovation can smother it. Yet, introverts adapt. Many learn to perform extroversion when needed, delivering speeches, leading meetings, making small talk. But the effort is costly, draining their internal reserves. Cain calls this acting out of character. It is possible, even beneficial at times, but unsustainable if demanded constantly. Without spaces to recover, introverts burn out, misread as aloof or antisocial when, in reality, they are simply exhausted. Think of an introvert leaving a day of back-to-back meetings. While colleagues head to happy hour, they slip home, not to escape life, but to refill. A book, a quiet walk, a solitary hobby. These are not luxuries, but necessities. Just as athletes require rest to perform, introverts require solitude to thrive. Cain's narrative urges us to reframe how we view these rhythms. Instead of forcing everyone into a single mold of constant sociability, what if workplaces and schools honored different modes of engagement? What if silence were not mistaken for absence, but recognized as thought in progress? Living as a quiet soul in a noisy world can feel like moving against the current. But Cain reminds us that resistance is not failure. It is simply the sign of being different in a system built for someone else. The task is not to silence oneself to match the noise, but to claim the space where quiet voices can be heard. And when that happens, the world does not become less vibrant. It becomes richer. Because the hum of society needs both the loud chords of extroversion and the softer notes of introversion to play a full harmony. Why do some people thrive in noise while others withdraw? Susan Cain points us toward biology, reminding us that temperament is not merely a choice, but something rooted in the body itself. Beneath the surface of personality lies the machinery of the brain and nervous system, quietly shaping how each of us responds to the world. At the core is sensitivity to stimulation. Introverts tend to have nervous systems that react strongly to external input. A bright light, a sudden sound, even a crowded room. Their amygdala, the brain's emotional alert center, often fires more intensely. What feels like a small ripple to an extrovert may feel like a crashing wave to an introvert. This doesn't mean fragility, it means heightened awareness. Cain draws on research with infants to illustrate this truth. In one famous study, babies were exposed to new stimuli, unfamiliar faces, novel sounds, strange scents. Some squirmed, flailed, cried, their systems overwhelmed by novelty. Others remained calm, curious, unruffled. Decades later, many of the high-reactive babies grew into introverted adults, cautious and observant. The low-reactive ones leaned toward extroversion, craving stimulation rather than shrinking from it. From the earliest days of life, biology whispers its influence. This does not lock anyone into fate. A sensitive nervous system may incline someone toward introversion, but environment and choice still shape the path. What matters is not to deny temperament, but to understand it. A child who reacts strongly to noise is not difficult. They are wired to feel more deeply. In the right environment, that sensitivity can blossom into empathy, creativity, and careful judgment. In the wrong one, it can curdle into anxiety. Think of a volume dial set higher than average. Introverts walk through the world hearing the music of life turned up, every note sharper, every rhythm closer. Extroverts, by contrast, often need to turn the dial higher to feel engaged. Neither is better. Each brings strengths. The extrovert's appetite for novelty, the introvert's gift for noticing nuance. Cain also explores the role of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Extroverts tend to have more active dopamine pathways, spurring them to seek out excitement and social engagement. Introverts, with more muted dopamine responses, often find satisfaction in quieter pursuits, a deep conversation, a solitary project, a walk in nature. These biological differences explain why the same party that thrills one person may drain another, and why solitude that nourishes one may feel like deprivation to someone else. Seen in this light, introversion is not a shortcoming to overcome, but a reflection of how the nervous system dances with the world. It is as natural as eye color or height. Yet culture rarely honors this truth. Instead, introverts are urged to toughen up, to get out more, to speak louder. But biology does not bend so easily. Asking a sensitive system to thrive in constant stimulation is like asking a cactus to grow in a rainforest. Possible with strain, but unnatural. Cain's insight is liberating. To understand your biology is to understand your needs. It is permission to step out of the noisy race and find your natural rhythm. To know that your quick startle, your craving for quiet, your exhaustion after crowds are not flaws but signals. The body's way of saying, "This is how I work best." Science, far from diminishing the mystery of introversion, deepens its dignity. It tells us that the quiet person in the corner is not withholding life, but experiencing it more acutely. That their silence is not emptiness, but a fullness too vast for constant expression. The biology of temperament, Cain shows us, is the foundation on which personality builds. And once you see it clearly, you begin to recognize the profound variety in human design. Each nervous system tuned to its own key, each life composed in its own tempo. If biology shapes temperament, then honoring that temperament is the key to thriving. Susan Cain calls these sanctuaries restorative niches, spaces and rhythms that allow introverts to recharge, so they can return to the world with strength. Without them, quiet souls risk being drained dry, forced to live in constant overstimulation. Think of an introvert at a conference. For hours, they mingle, shake hands, listen to panels, and exchange cards. They can perform well, even brilliantly, in bursts. But afterward, their energy plummets. Where the extrovert may be eager for the after party, The introvert longs for a hotel room, a book, silence. That retreat is not laziness. It is maintenance, like a diver surfacing for air after time underwater. Cain insists that these restorative niches are not indulgences, but lifelines. They might be as simple as a quiet walk at lunch, noise-canceling headphones in a loud office, or a weekend spent in the garden instead of at social events. For some, it is creative solitude. Writing, painting, tinkering, where the mind finds calm focus. For others, it is nature, where overstimulation falls away and the nervous system resets. History is filled with introverts who flourished by carving such spaces. Charles Darwin structured his days with long solitary walks on a sand path he called the thinking path, where he mulled ideas that would change science forever. Bill Gates schedules think weeks, disappearing into a cabin with a stack of books and emerging with fresh strategies for Microsoft. These are not accidents. They are patterns, honoring temperament as a source of strength. The irony is that our culture often shames this rhythm. Children are urged to get out of their rooms. Workers are told to join in more. Retreat is equated with withdrawal, but Cain reframes it as a cycle. Introverts can engage powerfully with the world, but only when balanced by periods of solitude. To deny this cycle is to cut off the roots that feed the tree. Consider a classroom where the quiet student is allowed to reflect before answering. Their contributions are deeper, more original. Consider a workplace that offers private spaces alongside collaborative ones. Productivity rises because both temperaments are respected. This is the hidden architecture of thriving, design that gives people back to themselves. Cain also describes the idea of sweet spots. These are environments where introverts can stretch without snapping. Too little stimulation leads to boredom, too much to overwhelm, but in the middle lies flow, the state where focus sharpens and creativity blooms. For some, this might be a cafe hum that energizes without overwhelming. For others, it's total silence. The task is to know your sweet spot and guard it fiercely. Introverts who ignore this need pay the price. Burnout, irritability, even physical illness can follow when the nervous system is constantly overtaxed. But those who honor it often find they can contribute at extraordinary levels. Their ideas crystallize, their empathy deepens, their leadership steadies. Cain's message is simple but radical. Thriving is not about becoming someone else. It is about understanding who you are and building a life that respects it. In a world that celebrates constant engagement, carving space for solitude can feel rebellious. But it is in those retreats that introverts gather the power to return, renewed, focused, and ready to give their best. The image that lingers is of a tide, flowing outward into the world, then drawing back inward to the quiet sea. Both movements are essential. Deny either, and the rhythm collapses. Honor both, and life finds balance. Finds balance. Finds balance. Finds balance. To understand introversion fully, Cain takes us into the most intimate space of all, relationships. Love, family, and friendship become laboratories where the differences between introverts and extroverts are magnified, sometimes clashing, sometimes complementing, always shaping the rhythm of daily life. Imagine a couple. One partner loves to host dinners, the other prefers quiet evenings with a book. One thrives on conversation, the other feels drained by it. Neither is wrong. Both are living according to their natural temperament. But without awareness, these differences can harden into conflict. The extrovert feels rejected. The introvert feels overwhelmed. A cycle of misunderstanding begins. Cain shows us that much of the tension in relationships arises not from lack of love, but from lack of translation. Extroverts often misinterpret solitude as withdrawal, when it is actually restoration. Introverts sometimes misread sociability as superficial, when it is actually a genuine need for connection. The key lies in recognizing these different fuels. One runs on stimulation, the other on calm. families reveal the same patterns. Picture the quiet child in a loud household. Their parents worry that something is wrong, pushing them to speak up more or make more friends. The child internalizes shame, believing their natural rhythm is a flaw. Cain urges parents to resist this impulse. Instead of forcing children into the mold of extroversion, families can honor the child's temperament, giving them permission to grow in their own way. Friendship, too, carries its challenges. Extroverts may enjoy broad circles and constant activity. Introverts often prefer fewer, deeper bonds. One is not superior to the other. They are simply different currencies of connection. But when they meet, an introvert and an extrovert as friends, the contrast can be a gift. The extrovert draws the introvert into experiences they might not seek alone. The introvert offers depth, reflection, and calm. Together, they create balance neither could find alone. Cain tells stories of couples and families who learn to navigate these differences. She emphasizes compromise, not transformation. An extrovert partner might attend social gatherings while the introvert joins for a limited time, then departs without guilt. A quiet child might be allowed space for solitary play, balanced with gentle encouragement to practice speaking when ready. Harmony comes not from erasing difference, but from respecting it. This insight stretches beyond home. In workplaces, extroverts and introverts often work side by side, their collaboration enriched when they recognize each other's strengths. The extrovert energizes the group, pushing forward. The introvert steadies the pace, asking the questions others may overlook. Like two instruments in an orchestra, their tones are distinct but complementary. Cain reminds us that misunderstanding arises when we judge others by our own energy needs. An introvert who declines an invitation is not rejecting the friend. They are protecting their reserves. An extrovert who talks at length is not dominating. They are processing aloud. Once these differences are seen as temperamental rather than moral, empathy blooms. Love between opposites can be particularly powerful. Many introvert-extrovert couples discover that what once irritated them becomes what they most value. The extrovert appreciates the grounding calm of their partner. The introvert treasures the vitality and openness the extrovert brings. What began as friction evolves into complementarity, if both partners learn to honor, not fight, their nature. The truth Cain leaves us with is simple, yet transformative. Introversion and extroversion are not barriers to intimacy but opportunities for growth. They invite us to step outside ourselves, to see life from another rhythm. And in doing so, they teach us that love is not about sameness but about learning to dance to each other's music. We often imagine leaders as bold, charismatic figures, the ones who speak first, move fast, and command attention. But Susan Cain challenges this myth by showing us another kind of leadership, quiet leadership, born not from volume but from vision. Think of Abraham Lincoln, a man known for his melancholy, his careful thought, his preference for solitude. He was not the loudest politician of his time. He did not dominate through bluster. Instead, he led through listening, reflection, and moral clarity. His quiet presence carried more weight than the thunder of his rivals. Cain uses figures like Lincoln to remind us that introversion can be a foundation for transformative leadership. In business, the same truth emerges. Studies show that introverted leaders often excel with proactive teams. Why? Because instead of imposing their own ideas, they make space for others to shine. They listen, absorb, and encourage. Where extroverted leaders may sometimes overshadow their teams, introverts allow collaboration to deepen. Their restraint becomes an opening for others' creativity. Cain tells the story of executives who thrive not by dominating boardrooms, but by asking the right questions and letting silence work. Silence, in the hands of a quiet leader, is not emptiness. It is space where others can step forward. In that space, innovation flourishes. Yet, our cultural bias often overlooks these leaders. We train managers to project confidence, to command the room, to speak with authority. But authority can also come from presence, from the calm that steadies others in chaos. In a storm, people do not always follow the loudest voice. Sometimes they follow the one who radiates steadiness. Cain shares examples from corporate life where quiet leaders achieved extraordinary results. One story describes an introverted executive who led a massive turnaround, not by speeches or theatrics, but by carefully listening to employees, recognizing overlooked strengths, and crafting strategy from those insights. His leadership was not flashy, but it was effective and lasting. Even in classrooms, the principle holds. Teachers who are quieter often inspire students differently, not by dominating the discussion, but by creating a climate where students feel safe to share. Their humility becomes their strength. Their ability to step back invites others forward. This is not to say extroverted leaders are ineffective. They bring energy, charisma, and urgency that can ignite change. But Cain argues that the most sustainable leadership often blends both, the extrovert's dynamism with the introvert's depth. When introverts are excluded from the model of leadership, we lose half the potential styles that could guide us. Cain's insights invite us to redefine what leadership looks like. It is not always the booming general at the front of the army. Sometimes it is the thoughtful strategist behind the lines. It is not always the executive who dominates the stage. Sometimes it is the one who quietly empowers a team. The heart of quiet leadership lies in humility, the willingness to listen more than speak, to serve more than shine. And in a noisy world, that humility can feel radical. Imagine a workplace where leaders value silence as much as speech, reflection as much as action. Imagine a society that sees listening not as passivity, but as power. That is the revolution Cain points us toward, a vision of leadership that embraces the quiet. Step away from the boardroom and into the stillness of solitude. Here, Susan Cain shows us one of the greatest hidden strengths of introversion, the power of being alone. In a world that equates success with constant networking and visibility, solitude becomes almost an act of rebellion. Yet it is in solitude that many of humanity's deepest insights have been born. Consider Isaac Newton during the plague years, retreating to the countryside. Alone under an apple tree, his thoughts crystallized into the laws of gravity. Or J.K. Rowling, alone on a delayed train when the vision of Harry Potter arrived in her mind. Solitude is not emptiness. It is incubation. In silence, ideas are free to stretch, unhurried by noise. Cain reminds us that solitude feeds creativity in ways group brainstorming often cannot. Studies show individuals thinking alone generate more original ideas than groups pressed to perform together. Group settings tend to conform, to follow the loudest suggestion. Solitude allows the mind to wander, to make unusual connections, to discover insights that noise might drown. But solitude is not only about creativity. It is about spiritual connection, too. Across cultures and centuries, prophets, monks, and sages have retreated into silence to listen more deeply, to themselves, to nature, to the divine. Introverts often feel this pull innately, sensing that in stillness there is a conversation deeper than words. Of course, solitude is not celebrated in our culture. Too often, it is mistaken for loneliness. We live in an age where being alone is suspicious, as though presence requires constant company. Cain pushes back against this narrative. She shows us that solitude chosen freely is not loneliness but freedom, a chance to inhabit one's own thoughts fully without interruption. Picture an introvert in a noisy household, sneaking away to a quiet room. The door closes, the world softens, and suddenly the self re-emerges. Energy gathers again. Or the student who, after a long day of chatter, escapes into headphones and music, finding in those moments a center the classroom scattered. These retreats are not escapes from life. They are ways of returning to life with more clarity. Even extroverts, Cain notes, can benefit from solitude. But for introverts, it is oxygen. It is where they touch the source of their creativity, empathy, and strength. Without it, they become drained, brittle, unfocused. With it, they bloom. The lesson here is not to glorify isolation, but to reclaim solitude as necessary. Just as bodies require sleep, minds require silence. Just as muscles need rest between exertions, the spirit needs retreat between engagements. In solitude, the quiet mind restores its balance and prepares to give again. And so, Cain urges us to honor this rhythm. To design lives where solitude is not squeezed into the margins but given space at the center. For in that silence lies a secret. The breakthroughs we seek, the peace we crave, the wisdom we ignore. In solitude, the quiet voice inside us finally has room to speak. If solitude fuels adults, what about children? Susan Cain turns her lens to the classroom and the home, where the earliest battles of temperament are fought. Here, the quiet child often learns a painful lesson, that silence is suspect and loudness is rewarded. Picture a classroom where participation counts for half the grade. The teacher asks a question. Hands shoot up instantly, voices ring out, answers tumble one over another. In the corner, a child hesitates, not because they don't know, but because they are forming their thoughts. By the time they are ready to speak, the discussion has already moved on. They are marked as disengaged, when in truth they are deeply engaged in a different way. This is how introverted children are misunderstood. Cain highlights the quiet struggle. Teachers urging shy students to come out of their shells, parents comparing them to outgoing siblings, peers misinterpreting their silence as aloofness. The result? Many introverted children internalize shame, believing there is something wrong with who they are. This shame can follow them into adulthood, muffling their confidence. But Cain offers another path. What if we recognize temperament for what it is? Biology, not deficiency. What if, instead of pushing children to be louder, we created environments where their rhythm could flourish? A teacher might give students time to write before sharing, allowing introverts to organize thoughts. A parent might honor a child's need for quiet play, while still offering gentle opportunities to practice social skills. These small shifts transform shame into strength. Cain shares stories of children who blossom when understood. The boy who struggles in chaotic group games but thrives in one-on-one friendships. The girl who dreads oral reports but delivers stunning written essays. These are not failures. They are signals of how the child engages best. When guided with respect rather than pressure, such children grow into adults who carry their gifts proudly. The lesson stretches beyond classrooms. In families, siblings may embody different temperaments. One fills the house with chatter, the other retreats to read. Parents must learn not to favor one rhythm over the other. Both are valuable. Both deserve space. Balance, not uniformity, is the goal. Cain also notes that childhood is a time when introverts are especially vulnerable to being misunderstood. Without advocates, teachers who see their potential, parents who defend their temperament, they may withdraw further. But with support, their sensitivity becomes empathy, their caution becomes thoughtfulness, their solitude becomes imagination. Imagine the world if every quiet child grew up not feeling defective but valued. Imagine classrooms where silence was seen as potential, not absence. Imagine homes where the child who prefers sketching alone was not pushed to join every game, but encouraged to deepen their passion. The result would not be isolation, but a generation of balanced individuals who know their worth. Cain's message is clear. Raising quiet children is not about changing them into extroverts. It is about teaching them to embrace their own strengths, to know that their silence carries wisdom, to grow in confidence, not by speaking louder, but by knowing when and how their voice matters most. In this vision, childhood becomes not a struggle against temperament, but a nurturing of it. And from that nurturing emerges a new kind of adult, one who is both quiet and strong, gentle and unashamed, reflective and powerful. The journey of quiet closes not with a whisper, but with a call to reimagine the way society values human temperament. Susan Cain names it the quiet revolution, a movement to restore balance between the loud and the soft, the fast and the slow, the extrovert and the introvert. This revolution does not seek to overthrow extroversion. Extroverts bring energy, boldness, and the spark that ignites change. But when the world bows only to charisma, it blinds itself to half of its wisdom. Cain's vision is one where both voices are honored, where the stage has room for the speaker and the listener, the fire and the ember. Imagine workplaces redesigned not as endless open offices, but as flexible ecosystems, spaces for collaboration and spaces for solitude. Imagine schools where participation is measured not just by speed of response, but by depth of contribution. Imagine families where quiet children are not compared to louder siblings but celebrated for their own gifts. Cain sees signs that this revolution has already begun. Her book itself sparked conversations around the globe, giving introverts language for what they had long felt. Leaders, educators, and parents began to reconsider. Perhaps silence is not weakness, but power misunderstood. Perhaps the quiet were never lacking. It was the culture that was lacking balance. The revolution is personal too. For the introvert who has long worn a mask of extroversion, it is an invitation to take it off, to live with greater authenticity. For the extrovert who has always assumed quiet meant disinterest, it is a chance to listen more deeply. For society as a whole, it is an opportunity to weave both temperaments into a richer tapestry of human potential. Cain reminds us that history has always been moved by both kinds of people. The extrovert rallies the crowd, the introvert shapes the idea, the extrovert builds momentum, the introvert sustains vision. Progress is not a solo act but a duet. When we silence one voice, we play only half the song. And so, the quiet revolution asks each of us to act, to notice the quiet ones in the room, to give them space, not pressure, to value their contributions even when they arrive slowly, to remember that strength has many forms, and sometimes the strongest one is gentle. The closing truth is as steady as it is profound. We do not need to shout to matter. In a noisy world, quiet is not absence. Quiet is presence, held differently. Quiet is the pause that gives meaning to sound, the space where ideas grow roots, the breath that sustains the voice. Cain leaves us with this vision. A world where the quiet are no longer asked to transform into someone else, but welcomed as they are. A world where silence is not suspicion, but respect. A world where introversion is not apology, but pride. That is the quiet revolution, and it begins wherever someone chooses to honor the power of the quiet within themselves, within themselves, within themselves.